Shabbat, Lasuk B'Divrei Torah. All right, we're on page 96. We are now in the tractate, as this book does, gives us the highlights or the best of Talmud. And this one is going to be the Tractate of Shabbat, but as you often find, it does not always speak about the title. So even though it's Shabbat, we're going to be talking about Hanukkah. So, Diane, would you like to pick up? We are at the second paragraph of 96.
Oh, 96.
Oh, you just started the new tractate.
Yeah. Yeah, we worked on the Shema for a couple of weeks.
Okay, we don't want to do the introduction. You just did that?
We did it's the second paragraph. That's where we left off from last time.
Much of? Page 96.
Page 96.
I think
The
I'm on.
second paragraph starts with the tractate.
Okay.
Reference.
Much of this tractate is concerned with activities that are prohibited on the Sabbath. The Bible explicitly forbids certain kinds of work. For instance, the lighting of fires, but the connection between its ideas of the Sabbath and the Mishnah's elaborate system is not obvious. Study of a superepigraphia, such as the Book of Jubilees and of the Dead Sea Scrolls, has revealed a gradual evolution in Sabbath law. The Mishnah itself is evidence of later stages, moving from the first century debates of the schools of Hillel and Shammai on matters such as Sabbath preparation and muksi, to the list muksa.
Right.
What is
Muksa that's
Is
what we
work.
started talking about last week. So that's why we were going to pick up the second paragraph, but we picked up the first. So, and it's pseudepigrapha. Those are the books that are like extraneous to the Bible. So works that were done at around the same time, but did not get codified. Muksa is things that are not, one cannot use on Shabbat, and to move muksa is work. So if I have a pen, if I'm not going to write, this would be muksa. If I choose to pick it up, then I picked up muksa, and it's, quote, technically work. So same with a hammer or a rock or some other thing. So generally, okay, so.
To the listing of 39 categories of forbidden activity in chapter 7, and most likely a product of 3rd century Galilee. The tractate opens with a consideration of the prohibition of carrying on the Sabbath, that is, of physically transferring objects from public to private areas or vice versa, or of carrying anything more than 4 cubits within a public area. This is illustrated by the example of a householder welcoming a needy person at the door. Mishnah then discusses preparations for the Sabbath, and in chapter 2, the kindling of lights, to this day a significant Friday evening feature in the Jewish home. With what materials may the Sabbath light be kindled? The material rejected, whether as wicks or as fuel, either splutter or generate an unpleasant smell.
Okay, so typically we always assume that we're dealing with what? Wax, right? Because we're rich enough. We're rich enough to mostly afford wax, sometimes oil. No?
You're talking about the lights to be kindled, you know, the lights, which is the light, but you still have to light something else before you can light.
In terms of a wick, or you're saying in terms of a match.
You're right.
Okay, fair enough. In this particular issue, they're talking about what can you use. Sometimes wax, yes, but that was not available at the time. So the question is how are you going to? Normally, it would be a wick and oil. That was at the time in Mishnah and Gemara the appropriate piece. Now we think of wax, and we can afford wax, but that wasn't the case then. So that's why we have the discussion about it.
Well, you know, what brought me to matches was the unpleasant smell.
The unpleasant smell had to do with what they were burning,
Okay.
not how they were lighting it, but what
What
they were
kind of
actually
fat?
burning.
Well, you're still burning what you're lighting it with.
That's correct, although my thought is that they're talking about what they're going to be
The
burning for
end
the 25 hours, or
the-
whatever,
yeah.
right at the beginning of Shabbat,
Yeah,
or
what the end
whatever
result
else they're
is.
using for light during the time, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
The materials rejected, whether as wicks or as fuel, either splutter or generate an unpleasant smell. Wax candles introduced in 10th century Europe were unknown in Roman times, but are now commonly used to inaugurate the Sabbath. Though some use olive oil lamps as recommended by the Mishnah,
So some people do that even for their Hanukkah candles. For the Chanukiah, they have lovely little oil instead of, and these actually, you can see this particular Chanukiah uses Shabbat-sized candles instead of the regular Hanukkah small ones.
And if you wanted to, instead of putting candles in there, you could actually put oil and then a wick.
Provided it
Probably
doesn't-
not into this one, but there are some that are specifically made, yes.
Okay, so,
What we did for, we carved potatoes to use as kind of cure for my childhood.
Uh-huh.
So there was enough space. You can have like half a potato, cut off the top and bottom, to make it flat.
yeah.
And put it like 2 cups and scoop this, and then put oil in it.
So
And
did one potato make 2?
2, yeah,
Uh-huh.
something like that, yeah.
So you'd have like 5 potatoes to make 9.
But for the entire, we reuse them. We are not going to destroy new potatoes
Put
for
4
every
on
day.
each potato.
Yeah, you use the same ones.
So
Yeah,
in
Yeah.
Russia,
yes, that's all my childhood was like that.
So when your
We didn't have
Hanukkah was
much-
potatoes.
Potatoes with oil in it,
Uh-huh.
with wheat.
wonderful.
And not
And
because
what did you use a wick? What did you use
Yes.
for a wick?
my father
Roll-
rolled
some
some roll
bread,
of
yeah.
some
Mm.
sort. But I just know that this fun was carving out.
That would be
wheat.
fun to try.
But this was not because we didn't have candles. We had regular candles, not Shabbat candles or Hanukkah candles. We could have bought in the store candles, but they were big, and they would. We cannot
Extinguish.
them before we go to sleep. So we needed something that will burn as
Only a
fast
little
as
while.
Hanukkah candle.
So you knew exactly how much oil to put in and for
Right.
how long it would burn.
Yeah, it didn't burn that long. It's about as much. I don't remember exactly, but it was something similar to a Hanukkah candle because it was but we didn't have the real candle.
I gotcha.
Candle,
I got you.
and we couldn't extinguish them.
That's a great
what I
story.
learned.
Thank you for sharing that.
That is a
Never
great
heard
story.
of potatoes before.
I
Well,
never thought
they
about it.
served
But
that-
just now I'm thinking.
Nice.
They served another purpose in Russia.
What's that?
So if the commissar comes beating on your door
Uh-huh.
and saying, "What are you doing?" "Oh, we're cooking roasting the potatoes."
Roasting the potatoes.
So-
We're not actually like.
So just out of curiosity then, you didn't have like 9 oil wells because you didn't need to take the middle to light the other.
No, we didn't
oils.
We just, from what I remember.
So you'd
we
have
just
8?
With matches, just yeah.
So you'd have
And
8,
I
not
don't remember
9.
which side we started because we were more like in a group.
Uh-huh.
So we didn't have like a specific rules for lighting.
Okay, so it wasn't like this order. You didn't have them in a
No.
straight little row. You
Not
just you had them
necessarily, no.
together, and that was that.
And you did it, and what a great thing.
Well, that makes it interesting.
Okay. Alrighty, so
Well,
moving
there-
on.
There's also a lot of argument of what a Hanukkah should look like.
Well, we're actually going to deal with that in our tractate here,
Actually,
which is
Awesome.
why we're
Awesome.
moving in that direction.
Okay, so moving in that direction, wax. Let's see. I'm going to start.
Candles.
Wax candles. Wax candles introduced in 10th century Europe were unknown in Roman times, but are more commonly used to inaugurate the Sabbath, though some use olive lamps as recommended by the Mishnah.
Okay, so that's where we left off.
Right.
And then,
The Gemara asks what materials may be used for the lights kindled in honor of the 8th-day midwinter festival of Hanukkah. This passage, of which part is translated below, is the most informative rabbinic source for the festival, which Mishnah alludes to only incidentally. Nowadays, the 8-branched Hanukkah, or menorah, is a familiar object in Jewish homes and a subject for artistic creativity. Such valuable metal articles were beyond private means in pre-modern times. As we glean from the following passage, only important persons could be expected to afford light as well as fire.
okay, so, onto the Gemara, Mike.
Rav Huna said, those wicks of oil that the sages said may not be used for lighting on Shabbat, may not be used on Hanukkah, whether on Shabbat or weekday. Rabbah said, what is Rav Huna's reason? He holds that if the Hanukkah light goes out, you are obligated to relight it. So if you use only the best materials to forestall your whatever.
Negligently failing to relight.
To relight it. If it goes out, and he holds that you are permitted to use its light, that is for reason, that is for reading, you may have to use the best materials when lighting it, since otherwise it may sputter, and you might inadvertently adjust it, so infringing the Sabbath.
Okay, so what they're talking about here is often the issue was, what do you do in the situation where you have an oil lamp and it's Shabbat? So under strict halakha, if you adjust it, if you move it so that the wick is, gets a little deeper or whatever to keep the light,
Musky,
that
Mutski, is that can work?
muksa. It's moving things that shouldn't be moved, technically, yes. Although in this particular case, if you're looking at Shabbat candles, those aren't muksa.
Because you have to do it.
Right. Yeah, because it's not work to light Shabbat candles, it's a mitzvah to light Shabbat candles.
Wait a second, you light them
But-
before Shabbat.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
So
So,
you cannot, they are going crazy if you are trying to light them after Shabbat begins.
right, that,
That's the whole thing, and for some reason, a particular strip, they want to light it just before Shabbat, and if you 1 second too late, you cannot light it. When you want to light them an hour before, that's no good also.
Yeah, what
although
day-
some
what-
people
what day-
actually permit that because you're bringing in Shabbat earlier.
Yeah.
One just needs to be
You
really
think
ready.
so,
You
yeah.
have to be really ready if you're bringing it in an hour early.
Yeah,
what-
everything cleaned
What candle
and
gets lit on Shabbat?
I'm sorry, which what?
What candle gets lit on Shabbat?
What candle gets lit?
On Shabbat.
The Shabbat candles, or what else are we talking about?
Shabbat
It's a trick
candles are
question.
lit Before Shabbat.
Okay, so
How do you end Shabbat?
with a $1/2 candle.
And what do you do with that candle? And by putting it out, you're signifying the end of Shabbat.
Yes.
yeah.
So you light that candle on Shabbat.
Okay, good trivia question. Good trivia question.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
All right, so back to this paragraph. If the light goes out and you're obliged to relight a Hanukkah candle, Rav Huna is going to say that you really should have used better materials. Because if you use your best materials, then you are not negligent if your candle sputters and goes out, right?
Right.
But if you're using bad materials to start out with, okay, it was your fault that, had this problem. And so then there's this issue of, can you use those lights for anything other than to bring in or just to say it's Hanukkah? So can you read by them? Can you use them for other purposes?
Perhaps as a secondary
No,
function,
there's
but not
actually-
as a primary.
There's actually Holocaust, so
What
generally the answer is no.
what did we read? It wasn't here
But that's Holocaust, not Talmud, so.
about lights outside.
We're getting there, we haven't got there yet.
And
So
say
where do you
they have
put
to
your
be so far
Hanukkah,
back from
how
the
far tall,
street. Yeah.
la 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 la. Okay, so
Yeah.
we're gonna deal with some of those issues. Okay, so just in the very beginning, we're just at the beginning of the Gemara, we have not got to Mishnah yet, we're just at Gemara. Okay, so go ahead. Mike, do you wanna pick up at Rav Chisda?
I have no idea where we are.
Rav Chisda is the
Said,
next paragraph.
These
Those
Those
wicks,
wicks and oils that the sages said may not be used for lighting on the Shabbat, may be used on Hanukkah on weekdays, but not on the Sabbath.
okay, so some of those poorer materials, poorer quality, well, you could probably use those on the weekday, but you can't use them to light the lights, the Hanukkah lights, that you're gonna use near Shabbat.
Well, if they used an oil, the only other thing they had at their availability was tallow, which was meat rendered from animal fat.
Okay, and
They used beeswax back then too, also, didn't they?
I assume that that's probably correct, because they certainly have bees.
So anything that could be utilized was.
Sure, right. So old clothing, old materials, things that have been used, for rags or otherwise.
Made
Yeah,
wicks.
so all of those to either create wicks or.
I
or
love the
something to
potato
light.
concept.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, Judy, are you?
Rabbi Zera said in the name of Rav Matna. Some say Rabbi Zera said it.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
we
the
would
name
back
of
up
the
just the indentation, because we
I
missed that one.
He holds that if the Hanukkah light goes out, you do not have to relight it, and also that you are permitted to use its light.
Okay, so using its light. So we have different opinions about whether you can or cannot, quote, use the lights of the Hanukkah.
And
Okay,
Rabbi
Rabbi
Zer is the name of Rav Matna, but some say it was the name of Rav. Those wicks and oils that the sages said may not be used for lighting on the Shabbat may be used on Hanukkah, whether on weekdays or on the Sabbath.
Okay, so what's the rationale that you think that they're using here? What's the rationale behind using less good material, and when is less good material permitted?
When there's no other options.
Okay, that's not what we're learning here. What's our hierarchy that we're learning?
Shabbat is the most important.
Shabbat is the most important, so we're going to use our best materials for Shabbat, and our best materials for Hanukkah Shabbat, and then our materials appropriate for Hanukkah weekdays. Okay, so that's the hierarchy. Setting the priorities in terms of which should be used.
Holiday is more important. Rav Yirmiyahu says, what is Rav's argument? Rav holds that if the Hanukkah light goes out, you do not have to relight it, and you're forbidden to use its light.
Okay, so are we going to relight it if it goes out or not? And are we allowed to use its light or not?
I'm confused.
Okay, these are just
It's
various
very- it is
opinions
very
Okay.
looking at the very same
confusing.
issue.
It says you can use the light of the Hanukkah.
Who says?
One says
Well,
yes,
no,
one
one
says
says-
no.
No, but it says you can't use it.
We're talking about different opinions of various rabbis, right? Okay, so some say you can use it and you can relight it. Some say you can't use it and you can't relight it. Okay, so
the
there's
light goes out,
different
you do
opinions.
not relight it, and you are forbidden to use its light.
Okay, but
you
then,
can also read it. You can also understand that sentence. Where if it goes out and you relight it, that when you relight, you can't use its light.
however that goes, but that's not what they're talking about here.
You
We're
can-
talking about the entire group, because it would be very difficult when you've got 4 candles in a row.
Right.
Like this example, which is, the reason I got this one out is because it matches the book. So to use one light, but not the other lights, because the light tends to blend together, right? Okay,
Right.
so the disciples,
Okay, disciple reported to
Abaya,
Abaya in the name of Raya Yirmiyah, and he did not
accept it. He did not accept it.
accept it. But when Rabbin came and they reported the same statement to Abaya in the name of Rabbi Yohanan, he accepted it. He remarked, had I been worthy, I would have learned this matter earlier. But he learned it, so why the regret? It made a difference with regard to the learning of youth.
Okay, so what is this paragraph coming to teach us?
That it's important to learn that when you're younger, not older.
And in specific, it was important, he had the opportunity to learn it the first time through. Had he accepted it, what a great thing. But he didn't, he would not accept it, even though his disciples came and told it to him. His disciples came and said, this is what we've learned, this is Rav's argument,
Footnote 1.
and he was not paying attention to it.
Right, footnote 1 explains the whole thing.
What you learn in childhood is more firmly rooted in your mind. Kalman suggests that Abaya at first rejected the view because Rav Yirmiyah was a lesser authority. That's about this authority thing also, not just the regular
Who's the most, yeah.
Who
And,
you
and,
listen to.
and he regretted it because when he was learning with his youth, when he was teaching the religious school, he taught them not correctly, okay? That's why he's saying, now, yeah, it's good that he learned it eventually, but he didn't accept it the first time round, so that's what he's regretting. He's feeling bad about it. Okay, so the top there just says Chanukah, the 8-branch Chanukah, parentheses menorah, because people often call it that. The dedicated Hanukkah lamp and the use of wax are medieval developments. So the lamp is not something they had back in this time either. We're not thinking about they're going to have a branch thing like this. It's going to be more like Judy's situation where you have a bunch of potatoes that, you know, you're lighting however many there are.
The stuff that they have from Roman times looks like this, you know, this like a boat-like shape, like that, and then and there's a kind of a support for a wick. So this is an opening on top, and it's ceramic, and the wick comes up here.
Do you want to draw here?
Well, you know the stuff that they sell in the market there now, but they also have the real ones that they dug up in
the ancient styrofoam.
Something like that, and this is the opening. That's where the oil set inside this thing.
Yeah.
And the wood came out here. So you light it here, and this was decorated with all sorts of things around the perimeter. So it was like a shell from walnut with a hole on top, basically.
Yeah.
There's this support for a wick, and you can buy them in the market now, but like they're very cheap. But the real ones that they actually dug up.
Yeah, they give you a little certificate that says genuine reproduction.
Yes,
Made in China.
yeah.
So with this one, this was one of the issues because can you tip your lamp? Are you going to break Shabbos by tipping your lamp so that the oil is a little bit further towards the wick, right?
And they of course were sitting on the table in any kind of order. They probably line them up at the end, but
Yeah,
but they are not attached with the support.
exactly. So good, okay, good. All right, we're at the bottom of 98 there, go ahead.
So if the Hanukkah light goes out, don't you need to relight it? As against this, we have learned the mitzvah of the Hanukkah light extends from sunset until the time that people stop walking about in the streets. Okay, so it doesn't have to burn all night. It just burns this short time. Okay.
And actually, footnote 2 there, if you could pick that up.
In the days when there were no street lighting, this would normally be half an hour or so after sunset.
Lately, what's that, like 4 o'clock to 4:30 these days?
Yeah. Doesn't this imply that if it goes out during that period, you must relight it? No. The intention might be that if you haven't lit it, you may still do so. Alternatively, it is an indication of the quantity of oil you should put in a lamp. So it's all sorts of calculations of
How much and how long it should last.
Not to waste it, yeah.
Right. Well, I waste, there's an entire principle, which is what? Anybody recall the name of it? Not wasting? No? Okay. Bal tashchit. So the principle midah is.
Is that an SH?
Yeah. What's an SH? Bal tashchit. So don't waste. One of our many ethical midot to work on. All right. So we're
How
at.
long is that period?
Okay, go ahead. How long?
How long is the period from sunset? Rabbi Bar Hana says until the Palmyreans start walking around.
Okay,
Palmyreans
are
the itinerant sellers of kindling material. Read Tadmorai instead of Tadmordai. Tadmor is Hebrew Aramaic for Palmyra. Oh, yes, and it's mentioned in Kings 9:11, or Kings 1. So this is now thought to be a misreading of Tamar.
An interesting piece. Okay, so we're at the next section. The rabbis taught the basic mitzvah of Hanukkah is to kindle 1 light per household each night. So that's the bottom line, right? The basic bottom line. 1 light per household each night of Hanukkah. So first night, how many lights do we light?
No,
how can we
actually,
light? We have to light the shamas, right?
Yeah.
So which one? Obviously, you can figure out on this one, which is the shamas,
The middle?
right? So that's the Mike?
But I still
There-
don't
there-
remember from
there
what
again,
side to start.
You know, it depends who you read, because it's normally assumed that you, in order for Hanukkah to be Hanukkah, that the Shamash has to be higher than the other one.
Or
So-
it's
but-
not always higher, it's just unique,
Unique,
different.
right.
We have
because
one that sits
some-
on the end.
Yes, some are the, and I didn't bring out, I've got several, so some sit on the end, some are higher.
They're not have to be in the middle, and,
I
but,
actually think
but
I
there
have
are
one where
some
it's lower.
lower,
Yeah,
but it's not, it depends it depends what authority you read, because they're,
and we're in Talmud, where there's many authorities and many opinions, and often
Absolutely.
it's not until later that
And then
it actually gets
and
codified,
there's,
right?
best ones when you close Talmud, it's Mike's opinion.
There's that. Always that. Reb Mike has an opinion too. All right, so those who like to do better kindle one light for each person. Okay? Similarly, like with Shabbat, right? So the basic bottom line requirement may
8
be,
on the first night.
basic bottom line requirement is that one light is lit in the household. But if you have, for example, 2 daughters, do you have them both light plus you light also?
So-
Yes. So people who like to do a little better are lighting more.
So is that on the same Hanukkah, or do they have their own separate Hanukkah?
They would have their own
No,
separate.
separate.
Because otherwise you'd be lighting how many?
And they bring
But
the
it
stuff
doesn't
from
say
Hebrew
that.
school.
Okay, but that's what we're talking about. There's some part of the Masorah that you have to intuit. One is one light per household. Those who like to do better, light a light for each person. As those who like to do things in the best possible way. The school of Shammai says, now this is one way of dealing with it, light 8 on the first, then decrease by 1 each night. This is the classic argument, right?
And-
Then Hillel says, like 1 on the first night and increase
Increase
each
it.
night. So who won this argument?
Hillel.
And who
Hillel.
wants almost all the arguments?
Hillel.
That's right.
One more.
Okay, so you guys have got it. Good.
So Hillel is the protagonist and the antagonist is Shammai?
No.
No.
No, I wouldn't call it that.
Not that
I
far,
would
but,
say that they're
well, Shammai sets the stage.
9 out of 10 times Hillel wins the arguments in
Mm-hmm.
Talmud, but every now and then he loses.
every now and once in a long time. But what do we know
Once in
about
a
the
long
difference, generally speaking, between Hillel and Shammai?
Shammai is stricter
Right,
and Hillel is more accepting.
right, exactly.
Hillel is the one who said that if you want to study about Judaism, you can learn everything you need to know, but while standing on one foot. That's the Shammai. This
And
Hillel.
actually, I think we have that coming up fairly soon, or some similar piece on it. Okay, Ula said 2 Amoraim in the west, or the land of Israel. Rabbi Yossi bar Avi and Rabbi Yossi bar Zavida differed as to the rationales of the school of Hillel and Shammai on this point. One of them said, the school of Shammai want the number of lights to correspond to the days to come. The school of Hillel to the days that have passed. The other said, the school of Shammai want the number of lights to correspond to the oxen sacrificed on the festival of tabernacles. So 13 oxen were sacrificed on the first day of tabernacles, the number decreasing by 1 each day for 7 days. And in Maccabees, it recounts how when Judas Maccabeus regained the temple on the 25th of Kislev, the Jews celebrated tabernacles for 8 days and ordained that there should be an 8-day celebration each year commencing on that date. This account of the origin of Hanukkah links it explicitly to tabernacles. And the school of Hillel follows that the principle that in holy matters one should increase rather than decrease. And Hillel is the one we follow, depending upon which explanation you like. So,
What is the tabernacle? What does that mean?
I always think of tabernacles as actually being like booths, but it's not. Tabernacles in this case they're talking about in terms of Hanukkah.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's a good thing Hanukkah happened when it did. Because you have all this stuff that leads up to Hanukkah. And if it would have happened in the days, it couldn't have happened in the days of Noah because the starting of Hanukkah would still have been flooded. The earth was flooded for a year,
Okay.
or a little over a year.
Okay. So good thing that it came later.
Mhm.
Some people actually talk about it as being, Shammai is saying, well, there's 8 days, so there was 8 days that this cruise of oil lasted. So that's why you start with 8 and 7 and 6 and 5 and 4, because it mimics what actually occurred.
Right.
So, at any rate, at the top of 100, similarly, Rabbi Bar Chana reported in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that there were 2 elders in Sidon, one of them who followed the school of Shammai, and the other Hillel. One explained that his reason was that the number of lights should correspond to the oxen sacrificed on the Festival of Tabernacles, the other, that in holy matters, one should increase rather than decrease. So, and we like that explanation that one should increasing light. So that's why we do, among other reasons, why we do what Hillel said. The rabbis taught it's a mitzvah to place the Hanukkah light outside next to the door. If you live in an upper story, place it in a window overlooking the street. In times of danger, it is sufficient to place it indoors on the table. Okay, so now we learn from, at least in general, one should put it outside because we're, quote, proclaiming the miracle. Remember, this is not final halakha, this is Talmud. So,
It's interesting, the note 6 says that the rabbis had in mind persecution by Zoroastrians, that's in Persian, but
yes, yes.
Huh.
To whom
So-
fire was sacred.
so for some period Iranian Jews couldn't light.
If there was a problem with the Zoroastrians because fire was sacred, then it might be better to light it inside and not sort of, and to like close the windows. Yeah.
Do we get into this part where it's gotta be so many feet back from the street so don't set the.
I'm not sure if we're
We
gonna
just
deal with
get
that,
the
but
wagons on
we
fire?
have a number of different halachot, and it is, we do have some pieces of Talmud that will speak to that, so I don't know if that clip is here or not. Anyway, okay, Rava said, you need another light for personal use, but if you have a fire, this is not necessary. However, an important person needs another light even if he has a fire. So in other words, if you can afford it, you're going to have a Chanukah, plus you're going to have a light that you can read by. So what is Hanukkah? The rabbis taught 8 days of Hanukkah commence on the 25th of Kislev. You may not deliver eulogies or fast on those days, or that day. When the Greeks entered the temple, they polluted all the oil there. When the Hasmoneans overcame them, they searched and found just 1 jar of oil bearing the seal of the high priest, containing only enough oil to kindle, bearing the seal of the high priest, containing only enough oil to kindle the temple candelabra for 1 day. A miracle happened, and they kindled it for 8. So in a later year, they established the 8 days as an occasion for celebration with Hallel and Thanksgiving. So in footnote number 7, this is a drastic revision of the history as given by Josephus and Maccabees, neither of which mentions the miracle of the oil. The rabbis diverted attention from military victories and focused on the spiritual aspect of the event. So that's an important piece to consider.
It's really interesting because I grew up thinking the most important holiday is Hanukkah because my father concentrated on the military victory and Israel and nationalism and not on the religious aspect of the holidays. Even so, we did celebrate all of them. I was totally surprised to find in Israel that there are 3 festivals and Hanukkah is not one of them. Because I thought
Hanukkah was so important because,
and it was
right.
it was about military victory. It's about Maccabees. And
Yeah.
likewise, it's very nice. We'll read it, but it was not the.
But what did the Maccabees do?
They.
It was a civil war. Anybody that wasn't circumcised, they killed.
No, I mean, I don't want to argue about Maccabees. My opinions changed on many things since then, but I just am wondering how these
How the
things each other-
historians did not mention the miracle. The
Yeah.
historians only mentioned the military piece, and then the rabbis took and put a layer over it. Basically, is the opinion of later people who've come back and said, well, they didn't talk about this in these historical documents.
So my father kind of skipped the 2,000 years and just went back to the
You know, and for
Maccabees.
certain people at certain times, that military victory is very important, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's like really what you're looking for, you know, in
Yeah.
some places sometimes.
Well, you know, if you look at different civilizations over the history of the world, what did they celebrate? They celebrated the sun, the moon, or military victories. And we still do it today.
Sometimes, to pick up what the truth there, towards the bottom.
Okay. The canon of Scripture was fixed by the process of exclusion rather than inclusion. Books deemed contrary to Torah were suppressed. Here it is reported in Rav's name that some sages considered removing Ecclesiastes, Proverbs from the canon. Mishnah Yadayim 3:5 refers to attempts to exclude Song and Ecclesiastes. That's interesting. Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shemuel, said in Rav's name, the sages wanted to suppress Ecclesiastes since in words contradict one another. Now, isn't Ecclesiastes read before Sukkot?
Ayatha would be Tish B'Av.
Ecclesiastes is read before Tish B'Av.
Yeah, it's kind of like more of a moment.
And isn't each one of these books read before a certain time?
Well,
I'm
what do you mean
sidetracking.
before a certain time?
Well, like, I could have sworn I heard Alan say that Ecclesiastes is read at a certain time, and you're saying before Tish B'Av. Okay.
Tish B'Av. Although somebody could check that for me, just to like make
So,
sure. but
okay.
generally-
Okay.
I just know that certain parts of the beginning of Genesis are read in certain times around Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Sure.
But I didn't ever hear about Proverbs.
I don't know that they're read at a particular time. No.
Okay.
And Shir HaShirim, there was a whole discussion about it. At any rate, this is where we're moving in terms of the discussion. So we've talked about Hanukkah for a bit, and like Talmud often does, we're now wandering into a new section.
Okay. So why didn't they? Because it begins and ends with the words of Torah. It begins with words of Torah, for it is written, what benefit does a man gain from all his labor under the sun? Ecclesiastes 1:3. As they said in Rabbi Yanai's school, from that which is under the sun there is no benefit, but from that which preceded the sun, namely the Torah, Rashi, there is benefit. And it concludes with words of Torah, for it is written, an end to the matter all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is all of man. Ecclesiastes. What is the meaning of this all of man? Rabbi Eliezer said, the whole world was created just for this purpose. Rabbi Abba Bar Hana said, this is of equal value to the whole world. Simeon ben Azai, some say Simon ben Zoma, do you pronounce it Simon or Simeon?
Either way.
Okay. Said, the whole world, Simone? Shimon.
If you're looking for the Hebrew.
Yeah. The whole world was created just as means to this purpose. In what way do its words contradict one another? It is written, vexation is better than revelry, and of revelry, I said, it is praiseworthy. It is written, I therefore praised happiness, and of merriment, what good is that? No problem. Vexation is better than revelry. Means, when the Holy One, blessed be He, is angry.
Vexation is under the footnote, it indicates anger.
Well, vexation, I know, is irritation, definitely, so anger would fit quite well. Revelry is like party.
Joyous kind of thing.
Yeehaw, have a good time, yep.
Or something.
Yep. When the Holy One, blessed be He, is angry with the righteous in the world, it is better than when He is happy with the wicked in this world. Of revelry, I said, it is praiseworthy, is when He takes pleasure in the righteous in the world. I therefore praised happiness refers to the joy experienced in the performance of a mitzvah, and of merriment, what good is that? Is joy other than that experienced in the performance of a mitzvah? This teaches you that the Shekhinah does not rest on a man when he is miserable or slothful or engaged in revelry or frivolity or chatter or futile things, but only when he is in a joyful state, attained through performing a mitzvah as it is written. Elisha said, and now then, get me a musician. As the musician played, the hand of the Lord came upon him.
Okay, so just in backing up and looking at those couple of paragraphs there, what they were looking at is, should we keep this book or not? AFA. And the argument is, well, look, at the beginning and the end of this book are good things that are logical from Torah. We can find these in Torah itself. So therefore, this book should be of value and kept in. And then it's a further discussion on. So, and then the bottom piece talks about Shekhinah rests on someone who is joyful. So that would certainly be a Rabbi Nachman kind of piece. Do you want to continue on that?
Rabbi Huda said the same, approaching it in a joyful mood, applies to a halachic discussion.
Decision.
Thank you, decision. Rabbi said, the same applies to a favorable dream. Can Rabbi Huda be right when he says the halakha should be approached in a joyful mood? Didn't Rav Gidel say in the name of Rav, if
Disciple.
if the disciple sits in the presence of the master and his lips did not drip with bitterness, they will be burnt, as it is said. His lips are like lilies, they drip, flowing,
Flowing. Myrrh.
Yes. Do not read Shoshanim lilies. I thought Shoshana was a rose.
Either way, actually, it can be translated either as lilies or roses.
Okay. But Shonim,
Shonim.
the learned,
That learned.
thank you, and did not read.
Do not read more,
I can't
meaning
even read
myrrh,
words today, yes.
but bar, meaning bitterness. Okay, so let's go back and hear what they're trying to sort of get across in this section. Anyone? And we actually probably should drop to the footnote there and look at that piece. So, if a disciple sits in the presence of the teacher and his lips do not burn with bitterness, or Levin says, the disciple should attend seriously to the master's discourse. And if not, then basically this is how they're getting there. The lips will be problematic. So
they say that maybe the Song of Songs, right?
that's what they're
supposed to be.
they're pulling their proof text from Shir HaShirim.
But they say that we misunderstand the words, Hebrew words. We say instead of his lips are like lilies, it should be his lips are
That
should
learned, and they drip
not
bitterness, right? They not myrrh, but bitterness, right? So for the disciple who is not paying attention or listening, essentially, this is what the problem is. Okay, that's what they're.
And when they say GPS here, that means GPS translation.
Yes, Jewish Publication Society.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and often they take proof text. Now, that doesn't mean that the proof text, when we read it in Shir HaShirim, it still means what we take to be the literal translation. That his lips are like lilies and they drip flowing myrrh. But in addition to that meaning, we have an additional meaning, and it's applied to this context about a teacher and student.
So, because the Bible was written at that time without vowels, so you can change the
Exactly
words.
this.
Instead of Shoshanim, Sheshanim.
Correct.
And Memresh can be either more or
Or bar, right.
Either
Either myrrh or bitterness, right.
Hmm.
So in this particular case, we have two meanings for the same verse, and they're trying to communicate why Shir HaShirim is an important text. So it's not just about this love song, la la la. We actually can learn out from Shir HaShirim more things. So Mike, I think you were reading.
Yeah, there's ways they could have put it would have been much simpler to understand.
But they always have to bring a proof text. They, I mean, that's where they're coming from.
Yeah,
They're
I
basically
understand.
interpreting and reinterpreting Torah for us so we can understand it better. And their logic is fascinating. So the fact that they bring a text and have us examine it in different ways is truly the beauty of Talmud. So there may be more than one opinion about this.
And
But
I-
generally speaking, I mean, they want, students who are paying attention as opposed to those who aren't.
Right, and I can see how they can get to both opinions.
Yeah, right.
It's not that difficult.
It's not that tough on this.
but-
Right, this is,
but-
all of this is probably, very, straightforward text here.
No problem. The master should approach the topic with joy, the disciple with seriousness.
Okay, so there's two different approaches to coming to whatever the subject is. The master in one fashion, the disciple in a different fashion.
Well, wouldn't it be the master's doing the teaching? And if you want your disciple, the student, to follow you, and it should be serious for the disciple, that you're not going to get that disciple to follow you unless you approach it with joyfulness.
All of those things are true.
And the perfect example of that was on World Learning Day, when the two rabbis did approach the subject with very much joyfulness.
True.
See?
But Mike, there's this little lapse in terms of the disciple approaching it with seriousness.
No, but a student should always be serious, and to entice the student, the teacher you start with something sweet or joyful.
One endeavors.
Okay. Alternatively, and those statements may apply to the master. One before he commences, the other through the discourse, as was Rabba's practice. Before the discourse, he would tell a joke, and the students would laugh, but then he would sit reverently and begin the
Exposition. So Rabba had a practice to tell a joke at the beginning. You've actually had a couple calls and haven't been able to take them. Sorry.
So
Okay, thanks.
It makes it even.
At some level it does. Okay, so 102 at the bottom, Judith.
They also consider suppressing proverbs since its words contradict one another. Why didn't they? They said, did we not examine Ecclesiastes and resolve its contradictions? Well, usually find a reason for them. Okay, we will examine this book too and resolve its contradictions.
And really, that's one of the things that Talmud often does, is we have opinion A and opinion B. And if we can't somehow resolve them by saying, well, A was referring to this piece and B was referring to that piece, somehow we bring them into harmony. That's what we often try to do. And then there's a few takers. But anyway.
Yes.
In what way do its words contradict one another? It is written, do not answer a fool in accord with his folly, verse, and it is written, answer a fool in accord with his folly. Okay, no problem. One verse refers to matters of Torah, the other to worldly things.
Okay, so catch that?
Yeah.
All right, so we have two verses that are bumped up against each other directly, right? One says, don't answer a fool in accordance with his folly. And the other says, answer a fool with his folly. Okay? The first one, and they're going to tell you, they refer to two different things. This one refers to Torah, that one refers to worldly matters. Okay.
And every time Rabbi answers me, she does the second one.
I answer you according to material things.
This is like the man who came before Rabbi say, your wife is mine and your children are mine. Rabbi said to him, would you like a cup of wine to drink it and first? Likewise, and then of course Rabbi here saying, your mother is my wife and you are my son. Rabbi here said to him, would you like a cup of wine to drink it and first? Rabbi here.
And so you can see why this might be a problem drinking some of this guy's wine, right?
It is first, not
One of
just
one of three.
Rabbi
In the
here
middle.
remark. Rabbi Rabbi's prayer helped that his children should not be stigmatized as bastards. So he used to pray, "May be your will, Lord our God, to protect me this day from insolence and from insolent people."
Okay, so and that's part of the regular morning prayers.
Morning.
Okay, so how does it apply in Torah matters? An example would be Rabban Gamliel, who was expounding the theme of the world to come, Olam Haba, and said, "A woman will give birth every day. As it is said, she will conceive and give birth together." This is a literal translation from Jeremiah. Yirmiah. A disciple laughed at this and saying, "There is nothing new under the sun." Rabban Gamliel said to him, "Come, let me show you something like it is in this world." He showed him a hen. Another time, Rabban Gamliel was expounding the theme of Olam Haba and said, "The trees will bring forth fruit every day. As it is said, it shall bring forth boughs and produce fruit." Yes. Just as it always has branches, so there will bear fruit each day. A disciple laughed at this, saying, "There is nothing new under the sun." Rabban Gamliel said, "Come, let me show you something like it in this world." He went out and he showed him a caperberry bush. All right, so here we've got Rabban Gamliel who's trying to describe the world to come. And we know that there's somehow a parallel in this world. So whatever the issue is, he needs to be able to find something in this world that is like the world to come. In the first case, she will conceive and give birth together. And the disciple, the student, is laughing, saying, "Yeah, right, let me give you this proof text from Ecclesiastes, Ayecha." But Rabban Gamliel says, "Well, let me show you something in this world that is like it." He shows him a hen. What does a hen do? Conceives and gives birth the same day. Because hens, when they're laying, give birth, or put eggs out every day, and sometimes several every day, right?
Once approximately every 8 hours.
Okay, so there you go.
For the average child.
And hopefully those are the cage-free, range-free, free-range chickens that are happy and out eating their own,
And the
scratch out in the world
and-
and pecking and having.
With the well-adjusted children, yes, for the ones inside produce an egg every 6 hours.
Okay, so see that was my question. Every 8 or every 6? Depending. All right, so now we have the next discussion. Gamliel is saying trees will produce fruit every day. So it shall bring forth boughs and produce fruit. So the disciples think, now wait a second, I'm not so sure about this. And Gamliel is showing him whatever this caperberry bush is. And we read in footnote 15, the caperberry is always productive, bearing berries, flower buds, and young shoots at different times of the year, according to Rashi, based on Mishnah Ma'aserot. So this particular Caparis spinosa, one wonders if it has anything to do with any spinosa that we might know otherwise, is a classic Mediterranean condiment that is still used. All right, so then the third example here. Another time, Rabban Gamliel was expounding on the theme of Olam Haba. The trees of the land of Israel will one day produce loaves of bread and silken garments, as it is said, "Let there be abundant grain in the land," according to Psalms. A disciple laughed, saying, "There's nothing new under the sun." Now we have Rabban Gamliel who's going to show. So let's first look at abundant. What does that mean? Footnote 16. The unusual Hebrew word used for abundant suggests silk. So there's some overlap between the two of those. But Gamliel is bringing them forth and saying it's not just going to be producing loaves of bread, but silken garments. Okay. Rabban Gamliel said to him, "Come, let me show you something like it in this world." He went out and he showed him mushrooms and toadstools shaped like loaves, according to Rashi, and soft young palm fronds with the appearance of silk. Okay, so he's bringing all of this, the umbrella over all of this is why are these texts important? Why should we keep them in our actual Tanakh as opposed to putting them in the pseudepigrapha. And each of these were brought proof texts from Torah to indicate why they were important. So we are also learning a second layer of text in addition to the one overlying everything. Okay? So does that help? Does that make sense? All right.
There, but you know, it's funny because it's
It's funny.
yeah, because it's somewhere that the model was supposed to be able to mimic everything.
We read that in the Midrash.
Right. But I don't do that anymore. But because then there wouldn't have been variety and said, give us meat, give us meat.
Okay.
So, but this was very similar in the way that it was referring to it tasting like or mimicking other foods.
So one day, and this is back on the last piece, the trees of the land of Israel will produce loaves of bread and silken garments. Gamaliel is bringing this text and using two different meanings for the word abundant. One is for abundant grain, and that's where he's getting produced loaves of bread,
Right.
and abundant in kind of like a homonym for silken garments. Okay, so someday in Israel, God knows, we're going to have bread growing on trees and garments, or silk at least, growing on trees. And with the way that Israel is moving forward in her technology, it would not surprise me in the least. So, Toda Rabba, thank you all for coming today. We need to deal with